hold on to your seats because I got a lot to say and I got to sort of go fast. But I want to lay some groundwork here for the other panelists and a little bit for the session overall. So my talk is why a decentralized energy system, and I'm gonna start with a conclusion because I want to make sure I get to that, and then I'm gonna sort of go back and then try to work my way back up to it again. So in case I don't have enough time, at least I'll get to the conclusion right at the beginning. Here we go. The benefits of local decentralized energy. The bottom line. These are really the important aspects that we want to stress today. One is that it can help communities mitigate and adapt to the impacts of climate change, build resiliency, key value. Number two, it can be an engine for economic revitalization of communities and job growth. And it can be a secure source, can be a source of community wealth, equitable development, democratic control, healthy community. So these are the three main themes there that we want to talk about, the benefits, and I'm just going to now try to lay some framework for getting there. The challenge. So we all know that fossil fuel is threatening life. Greenhouse gases are destabilizing the biosphere in which we live. I mean, I'm talking both about the atmosphere and about the oceans, both important for the whole food chain of life and everything else. Electrical generation is responsible for about 40% of greenhouse gas emissions in the United States. So it's an important piece that we have to really consider, and that's what this conference is really all about. And when we talk about that 40% of greenhouse gas emissions, we have to reduce that to zero. I mean, not 50% or 25%, but zero. All greenhouse gases are causing a problem, gotta go zilch, nothing. And that means, as Mark said, dramatic reduction in the amount of energy that we need and we consume, and for all that we do need, a switch to renewable. Just a note about current California's approach. California's approach currently is based on two things: a 33% renewables target by 2020. That means that 33% of energy sold by the utilities should be renewable by 2020. And then the Global Warming Solutions Act, AB 32, and a scoping plan that's been worked out by California Air Resources Board. So I just want to picture this very quickly. On the left-hand side is the current demand, and you can see that a good chunk of that is fossil fuel currently. Another big chunk is hydro and nuclear. All right, whenever we say nuclear, we do the right thing, right? And then a certain small percentage of renewable power. Now, the California Energy Commission has projected that by 2020, the normal demand would have increased. It's sort of mitigated by the fact that energy efficiency measures from AB 32 would be put into place, so that reduces that demand somewhat. An increase in renewable energy, that's that sort of yellowish area, and that's due to the 33% target, largely. And then pretty much the same amount of hydro and nuclear. Thank you. And but look at fossil fuel. Fossil fuel, you can see, is dramatically reduced, right? Hardly able to even see it. So my basic point is that this is not a prescription, really, for a transition away from fossil fuels. Now, just to give a little historical context here, this is the last 8 years when there was a renewable portfolio law in place, starting with 2002, and this shows you the performance of the investor-owned utilities. And there's a lot of lines there because it shows each utility and then an average, but if you basically look across, you'll see that except for 2010, there's basically no progress over the last 8 years, and 2010 is a forecast. Well, they've actually reported the figures, and they're much less than the forecast. And actually, the figures that they reported are the figures reported by the utilities themselves, which historically have not been accurate. So it's pretty much a good approximation to say that there's been almost no progress in terms of increasing the part of renewables by the utilities. And here's why: because fossil fuels have outpaced renewables. This shows that the natural gas development over the last 10 years has continued to increase and increase and increase, so that the percentage of renewables, even though there are some renewables that are being put in place, percentage-wise, have been pretty much the same or slightly increasing. And this hasn't stopped. Right now, there are efforts to build more power plants. There's two in Contra Costa County. There's one over on the other side of Altamont Pass, the Mariposa project. They just broke ground in Tracy for a new power plant. And in Hayward, there's a Russell City power plant that's under heavy contention now. So all this stuff is still happening. So that's what we look forward to in terms of any real progress. That fossil fuel piece at the bottom, it must go, and it's not going under current plans. Just to say that the business as usual California plans to achieve what we need to achieve are like a no starter for all intents and purposes. Maybe in a couple centuries we'll get there, if we're around still. So there's two models if you really want to transition from fossil fuels. This is a remote central station energy model, and the local decentralized energy model. So I'm going to just talk really briefly about these two because they're very different kinds of models. So the remote central station energy model, big stuff out in the desert, it sort of looks like this, or it looks like this, or it looks like this, or it can even look like this. The bottom line to all of these things, all this type of energy development is that they're large, they're hundreds of megawatts. They're very heavily capitalized. That means, big capital investors. They're very destructive of the desert ecosystems. They're very unstable, big single points of failure. Right now in Japan, or maybe, I don't know if right now, but right after the earthquakes, 6 million people were left without electricity. That's because they had a centralized type of model. That's a very unstable way to deliver electricity. Because these projects are all remote, there's absolutely no local economic benefits, and on top of all that, it's very inefficient. There's huge transmission losses, maybe 7.5%. In contrast to that, we have local decentralized energy, and I just want to talk a minute about what that really means. So in terms of generation, decentralized is considered to be 20 megawatts or less, maybe at a maximum 10 times smaller than these big central station power plants. Are located close to load, that means to where people need electricity, and no transmission lines are required. And you can see here from this picture, I just pictured a few photovoltaic installations. They span quite a range of sizes, from a couple kilowatts on a normal rooftop to maybe 100 times that on the top of a building. I think it was California State University in Long Beach. And then maybe 10 times that at the Sunrise Reservoir in San Francisco. All local, all close to load, all decentralized local renewable power, but many different kinds of installations. And it's more than just solar photovoltaics too. I put in this picture because I love this rooftop picture. This is a car top picture, in fact, in Mountain View. But besides solar PV, you have wind, biomass, and biogas type of renewables. You have more highly efficient combined heat and power and geothermal. I'm not going to describe these. I just want to give you a notion that you have many mixes and types of renewables generation that are possible. But the key thing, as Mark said, is the demand reduction part of the whole picture. That more important even than the generation, in a sense, is the lowering the consumption. And there are many ways of doing this. And just for an example, if you take the case of a light bulb, or using electric lights, conservation means, well, you turn off the lights when you don't need them, right? So that's easy. Efficiency means you get more light out of any light bulb because it's a more efficient device itself. Substitution means that you don't use electricity at all, use natural processes, so you put a hole in your roof, right? And then eliminate stuff. And demand response means you sort of balance this all out. You don't have more light bulbs than you need. And the third piece is called the dance that has to take place between the generation and the demand reduction. And that's the balancing that comes because of the intermittent generation. You need storage, and you need the stuff to communicate with each other, and so on and so forth. So that essentially is a decentralized energy system that we're talking about. It's very dependent on location and geography and resources. So just a couple more slides. The benefits of decentralized energy are, number one, that we can actually achieve California targets because there's a huge benefit, there's a huge potential in urban areas. Fossil fuel really can go if we use this type of energy. And that decentralized energy, as compared to the stuff out in the desert, it's cost effective, it minimizes environmental impacts, it can be brought online quickly, it can provide increased energy security, and key is it can provide local economic and social benefits. And that's where I started out. These benefits, the mitigation and strengthening of communities, the economic engine for growth, and the ability to create healthy, stable communities, those are the benefits. So I'm pretty much done with it. I got back to where I started, and I just wanted to point out, as Rory said, is that the details of all these arguments are in this book here. It's out in the front, and the book is free, but an autograph costs $10, so whatever. Thanks very much.